think of it as a way of an introduction to biohacking. So yeah, my day job is a technology innovation manager at KPMG. My focus is around data analytics, and we help businesses like deals, tax, and legal try to essentially automate what they're currently doing using data analytics and machine learning. But by night, I help run this community called Transhumanism Sydney. We're also in Melbourne as well with the guys of Science, Technology and the Future. And yeah, we run programs essentially that goes through what is the cutting edge in technologies affecting AI, robotics, automation, and the likes. So thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed tonight. We've got a question from Sean.
Yes, I do. What is an exponential technology?
An exponential technology. Yeah, so that's one of the things I'll be introducing tonight. So exponential technologies are things that are essentially accelerating at the rate of Moore's law. So things like might be doubling in price performance, in terms of the ability to process more information every, say, 1 to 2 years. And that would include anything that would be around information technology. So we'll go through that tonight. So what is transhumanism, you might think of? I'll put that word out. And transhumanism is something. It's a movement around technologies. And it's got 3 pillars. We talk about super longevity. So it's basically about the integration of humanity and technology. And super longevity refers to things where you're actually using technology to enhance your biological health to make you live longer and healthier. Super intelligence, in the middle here, we talk about where we actually merge ourselves with intelligence. So enhancing our cognitive abilities. Now you're going to hear from Nathan talk about AI and job automation. So how do you actually keep competitive in a time where this rate of accelerated technology is happening? And super intelligence is going to be the ultimate way. We'll talk about the singularity later on tonight. We've got super well-being, so that's all about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, what makes you happy, what sort of things you want to cover to continue that sense of purpose as a human being. So, super longevity, today we live in probably the most exciting time of our lives. We've got drugs coming out, essentially that will increase the health span of, say, mice by 30%. A drug called metformin has actually applied to the mammals like mice and increased their healthy lifespan by 30%. We've got gene therapy, so you can target specific technologies around your genes and increase the healthy lifespan of mice, say, by 35%. And then you've got things like metformin, which say, 5-cent drug that you can get over the counter for diabetics, and that has proven to increase the healthy lifespan of mice by 40%. And that's going to clinical trials for humans today. So I think it's going to be a really exciting developments. We've got also technologies like gene editing. They call CRISPR-Cas9 that Meow's going to talk about later on tonight. So yeah, this is sort of all moving towards this sort of age of super longevity. So how many, can I put your hands up on how long people would like to live? Just as a sort of sample survey. Yeah? 50. We'll start with a low base. any other takers? Forever. Yeah, forever.
N+1.
N+1. Yeah, so it's 1 year longer than we are, is that right? Yeah, that's right. So I think the average lifespan in the West is around 80 years, right? So N+1, whatever you first got. But yeah, it's all about having the option of living a day more, right? And whether it's going to be a healthy day more, so you don't suffer the sort of diseases and the illnesses of old age. And at the same time, that option will provide you more time to do the things that you're passionate about. So we'll talk about more of that later on. Super intelligence. So we've seen that sort of AI developments accelerating in the past 3 to 4 years. The number of AI startups and the funding that's gone into the industry has gone at an exponential rate. And the actual delivery of the productivity, right, from AI is actually starting to crystallize. So you've got companies like Google's DeepMind that's beating the top players in AlphaGo, in Go, and now they've actually taken on StarCraft, right? So StarCraft 2 is actually the best players in StarCraft 2 are going to be defeated by a DeepMind. So chess was fairly easy. Then you went to, say, Jeopardy, like Watson. Now you got Go, you got poker, heads-up poker in Texas Hold'em. You would think that that was more of a sort of a human flavour to it because you've got bluffing involved. But yeah, that's been all defeated by AI. And Dota 2 was the recent one that was defeated by the sort of non-profit company called OpenAI that's set up by Elon Musk. And it just defeated the fan favourite Dendi from Na'vi through the latest international match. We've also got Elon Musk raising $27 million to start up a new company called Neuralink. And that's technology essentially merging the human brain with the cloud. So right now, we're accessing our technologies and the internet through our mobile phones. The natural, logical step, he thinks, is essentially going to straight integration with your biology through your mind. So that's sort of Neuralink. We'll let Nathan and the others talk a bit more about that later on. And Brian Johnson as well, a company called Kernel, he's thrown in $100 million, the money he learned from PayPal and the like. So Square, and essentially he's unlocking the human brain. So we've got competitors in this market. That's all happening. Super well-being. You guys might have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we'd start with simple needs for people to be happy in philosophy. Air, food, water, shelter, sex, sleep, all those sort of basic human needs. And you can probably solve these with, across the world, 7.5 billion people that, how do we eliminate hunger initially? There's companies like Soylent that have essentially turned the manufacturing of food into code. So, Soylent 3.0 is a different ingredient to make sure that people don't, have the runs after eating some of this stuff. You've got things like safety needs, so shelter. You've got companies that are 3D printing homes around the world to actually create emergency shelter. And in the future, you can standardize these, make it available to everyone at an affordable price. Think about affordable housing. You get a sense of belongingness, this communication, this intimacy, this social interaction. So I think if you live in a virtual reality world and Facebook that you have right now, if those Facebook relationships would feel just as it would in the sort of physical reality right now, how would that sort of enhance your Maslow's hierarchy needs around that step? Esteem needs. I know with Facebook Living right now, it's sort of your reputation, your status, its sense of self-respect. These are the sort of things that people strive for eventually in terms of maybe not everyone, but it helps in terms of their happiness. Cognitive needs, OpenAI, DeepMind, those sort of things, integrating the Neuralink, and the list goes on. So you might have things like AR kit that's coming out from Apple, essentially helping with your aesthetic needs. If you don't like the look and feel of any neighborhood that you're looking at right now, why not just put on some augmented reality glasses and make everything beautiful again? And that's sort of, it's always like the US, right? You want to make America great again, just go into this paralysis and wear these stuff and everyone will be great again. Right? Self-actualization was initially what Maslow thought was the ultimate step around this sort of sense of personal growth, fulfillment, the creativity that you would feel. But then before he passed away, he had this final thought. So how do we get people up to that self-actualization, right? This sense of purpose that's spread out to everyone in the world? And that's where he came up with transcendence, to help others, have that empathy and compassion. And that's where you sort of see people like Elon Musk going around, okay, so how do we make humans multi-planetary so that we don't suffer the consequences of our forefathers? We skip the basic income in terms of self-actualization. That means that you will have this sort of free time to do what you love without having to be bogged down by the daily grind and having to earn a paycheck. Just the same for the paycheck. So that's sort of transhumanism in a nutshell. Exponential technology, we mentioned earlier from Sean. This is just illustrating exponential growth. This is Steve Sasson from Kodak, who was one of the R&D guys that came up with the first digital camera. Back in 1975, it was 0.01 megapixels that weighed 3.6 kilograms. The board laughed at him. They said, what the hell is this crap? We're Kodak, we make beautiful photos. We're in the business of creating the oil and the paper printing business. So they laughed him off, and this is why they ignored the sort of exponential growth. 40 years later, you've got a camera phone that's got 12 megapixels, 1,000 times resolution, it's 1,000 times lighter, It's cheaper and it's dematerialized within your cell phone. You don't even know that you're carrying a camera anymore. And the next step of that is the human eye, because at the rate of exponential growth, if you can do a math on that, we're not too far away. And this is sort of how exponential growth creeps up on people, because when you're thinking linearly, say 30 steps, you get to 30 meters down the hall, and 30 exponential steps gets to 1 billion. It's about 25 times around the world. So this is another chart from Ray Kurzweil, as a futurist that sort of tries to plot how these exponential growths happens. It's on a logarithmic scale, so this is actually a lot sharper, but it won't be as aesthetically as pleasing as that. We've got things that happen during Moore's law, you can see from the 60s to the current phase, but every time that we get to a point where innovation is sort of halted, this says there's a new paradigm. So silicon, or the transistors, was one paradigm. The paradigm before that was the vacuum tubes that they used during World War II to crack the German Enigma code. And if you go all the way back, there was computer rankings, but we went from the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution to the light bulb to the moon landing to the World Wide Web, and it just keeps on shortening in the time that we can make those achievements. So by that analogy, he's extrapolated that and he's continued to say, well, if we get to 2045, the computational power of computers will essentially exceed the combined computational power of the human brain. And he said that will lead to the singularity. So that's one of the charts, probably the most important charts of our time. We'll see how he goes over the next 28 years. But yeah, just keep an eye out, because he's got about a hit rate of 83%. So in terms of as a futurist. These are our community partners. Thank you again to General Assembly for having us. Got BioFoundry from out here. We've got Effective Altruism, who's also running great things around Sydney and Australia. Science and Technology and Futures in Melbourne. We've got Basic Income representative from Shane. Orbidos, these guys want to put Aussies in space. Flux is also here. We've got Max K, Sid Ethereum, Nathan. And the Science Party, they send their apologies. They've just been trying to get their re-registration since the political party, but they want to double the science budget so that we can get this happening. So with that, I'll introduce you to the speakers. Nathan Waters, he is the founder of Peerism. So this is where, in the age of AI and automation, how do we collectively understand what the skill sets of everyone are using a decentralized system? He's also the founder of Sydney Ethereum and HackerCon. So it's from Wollongong, it's the biggest hackathon over there. I'll leave him to do more introductions. Meow, this guy probably doesn't need an introduction. It was recently on the ABC, the project on Channel 10, where they described him as he's actually pretty normal. He's an advisor of BioNascent with Shane, and he's the founder of BioFoundry. Max, co-founder of Exo.one and Flux, blockchainer, early Ethereum dev, so he might have some money if you guys want to tap into that. And a general optimist. So with that, I'll leave you guys to Nathan to give you the first session on AI and automation. Are there any questions before we roll it up? Just a couple questions.
How do I get more involved in transhumanism?
I'll come more to these meetups. Thanks for the planned questions. We also have a website called transhumanism.com.au, so check us out. Another plant, yes, we also have a Twitter handle, transhumanismau.
I don't think this was the original title of the talk, but like, I love the word job apocalypse, so it instills fear. Is this a quick one?
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so I will warn you that all of my prezos are usually in GIF format. So I hope you're okay with that. So, bit of background, so I'm Nathan Waters, so founder of Hackathon, which is a hackathon in Wollongong, been involved in Bitcoin and Ethereum and blockchain for quite a while. Should have invested way more back then. Started to see Ethereum, which is an Ethereum meetup. The next one's actually this Thursday. It's pretty big. I think the next one, we've had to cap the numbers at 180 and there's like 20 tickets left. We might increase it a bit more. Did a thing, so I lived in Wollongong for about 11 years. It's such a better lifestyle down there. I moved up in Sydney about a year ago. Oh, it's just sucks up here. So I used to like just, my daily routine would be paying low rent, walking down to the beach every morning, getting a coffee, and then filming new future ideas. So you can go see my rambling rants about the future and all sorts of stuff at that channel. And my latest project is Purism. So Purism is a blockchain-based protocol to essentially create a new economy to transition to post-capitalism, because capitalism is not working anymore. I'll explain that a bit more later. So let's just go through quickly some of the issues with the current economy. It all starts with education. The education system really isn't keeping up with the pace of technology. I mean, you do a 4-year degree, you come out at the end, half of what you learn is already irrelevant because technology moves, it doubles every year. And even back in primary school and in high school, we're taught in a very linear fashion. If you're in year 2, you don't speak to people in year 3. We're segregated in a box, and we're all taught at the same pace, the same thing. It creates these homogenous workers, and it's really a relic from the industrial era where it created workers for factories. So it doesn't work anymore. And then we go into jobs. And jobs are I've always thought that jobs are, to be honest, a form of slavery. Because you essentially do the same thing day in, day out. You have one job role, you work for one company, you do that 40 hours a week. It's homogenous, you're boxed into a role. And this actually makes you way more likely to be automated. The way we've structured society and our economy, it makes us much more susceptible to automation, and it makes it much more of a threat, which I'll explain a bit later as well. Then you go into the workforce, and the workforce, if I remember the stats correctly, so full-time work is down, part-time work is up. We're in a situation where, I should just hang on. Put off my notes, so I can see it. Is it going to change my notes? Yeah. Maybe not. What? The workforce is that wages have actually been decoupled from productivity since about 1974, and US corporate profits are at an all-time high, and you can actually look at the graphs, and the same amount that US corporate profits have gone up, workers' wages have gone down the exact same amount, so I wonder where they went. This is giving rise to a new form of worker class, like you might have heard of the proletariat, the working class. Now we have the precarious working kind of class, where they're doing gig work and they're not quite sure where the next paycheck will come from. And the stats here are pretty insane. Something like 1.4 billion people are in vulnerable employment. There's 600 million what are called NEETs, so 16 to 24-year-olds who aren't in education, employment, or training. So it's becoming pretty bad. And then you add to that automation, and automation is getting insane. I'm going to load up stats. Hang on. It's on my phone. Facts make it back in a wash. So automation it's already eating away a lot of the workforce. So from 2000 to 2010, 5 million US manufacturing jobs were lost as a direct result of automation. And as a result of that, you can actually, there's a study recently that showed that for the first time ever, middle-aged white men in the US, their life expectancy is actually reversed because they're taking up so much drugs and the opioid epidemic that's happening in the US, and they attribute this to automation. Their life expectancy is actually reversed. And so, you can imagine this is where things like the rise of Trump and all these other things are kind of coming from, that kind of middle America that lost their jobs to automation. So we can just see that coming further and further down the line. Get to the slide. Where is it there? Okay. Also, so robots kill 5.6 human jobs. And on top of this, so it's already bad now, but it's only going to get worse. So India is going to be an interesting one to look at. So they're actually expecting a job shortage of 50 million jobs by 2025. And on top of that, the age-old stat that you've probably heard everywhere, 47% of all jobs globally are expected to be automated within the next 10 to 20 years. I think the place we'll see this most prominently, whether it be in the factories or be on the roads, is with things like self-driving cars and self-driving trucks. So Otto, which Uber bought, and Tesla, they're all building self-driving trucks. The US trucking industry is the largest employer. Like, if you look at every single state, the largest employer is trucking. And so it's expected to, there's 3.5 million drivers and 3.5 million kind of ancillary roles that are expected to be automated. And that's just manufacturing. So we tend to think, when we think of automation, we tend to think of, factory workers going, manufacturing going. But I actually think that AI poses a far greater threat to white-collar workers. I mean, what do white-collar workers do all day? They sit in a computer screen all day and essentially move data around in various ways. I mean, what is AI good at? AI is good at watching what something does, taking a huge data set, learning how to do that. AI can replace white-collar jobs far faster than it can replace bricklayers, than it can replace, mechanics. Like, we tend to think of these jobs as lesser jobs, collectively in some weird way. But I actually think that those jobs are probably, potentially, I mean, it's hard to tell because we're talking about the future here, but they're probably safer than white-collar jobs. And so this is, Peter mentioned this, Dandy was beaten by OpenAI, and they're all trying to build, the reason they're testing these Dandy systems is so that they can actually quickly iterate and learn. So the OpenAI system actually learned how to beat Dota in 2 weeks. It essentially played multiple lifetimes of games and learned how to beat him in 2 weeks. And I'm sure they'll do the 5v5 and they'll win that inevitably. Inevitably, every single type of esports will be owned by AI. And this is just a precursor to creating a general purpose learning system where essentially it just, imagine a system that sits on your computer all day and watches exactly what you do, where your cursor moves, what you type in, everything you do. It'll learn what you do far faster than you expect. And so really, why do we fear AI? Why do we fear automation? It's a massive kind of news cycle story at the moment. And really, it comes down to this. The only reason we fear AI is because the collective, the profits and the value created from AI are not collectively shared. I mean, people inherently know that if their job is automated and they're let go, where does that salary, the salary that was previously paid to that person who's let go, it doesn't go to them. It doesn't go back to help retrain them. Instead, it goes to the shareholders, to the employer, and this inevitably increases wealth inequality. Oh, hang on, go back. So things like Google and Microsoft, they have this PR line where they're like, oh no, jobs won't be automated. Your tasks will be automated, and you'll get better, and you'll be more efficient. I think that makes sense for a big company with multiple billions of dollars and a workforce that's agile and a product line that's very always changing. But you've heard stories of like, oh, Amazon isn't destroying jobs; they're creating jobs. Look, they're hiring more people. It's like, well, yeah, look at the retail sector; it's completely decimated. That's what happens internally. Sure, you look like you're adding jobs, you're growing, you're improving, but you decimate everything else that doesn't catch up. So what could possibly happen with AI? So, this is Greece. So Greece had a 60% youth unemployment, austerity measures about a few years ago. They had 25% unemployment kind of generally, and 75% of households had, actually just last year, significant income loss. And this is the latest one, Venezuela. So they're experiencing hyperinflation and kind of like a dictatorship type transition. But again, it comes down to like unemployment rate, and it's a 25% unemployment rate, and now they have a hunger crisis. 75% of their population has actually lost 9 kilograms on average in the last year. So what the fuck do we do? So there's a few kind of general options that people talk about. So 4-day work week would be an obvious one. Like, let's just work less so that there are more hours available for people, so we can kind of share the work around. Let's go from 4 days to 3 days to 2 to 1 to nothing, hopefully. You've probably heard of a robot tax. Bill Gates seems to love that idea. Cool in theory, absolutely impossible to implement. Like, how would you do that? You'd have to tax software, you'd have to tax robots, and if you tax it in one country and not other countries, then you naturally just, businesses will move overseas. Job guarantee, this is a big popular one as well, I think with typical worker type groups, because they think that UBI, this basic income, is a bit of a, like, just give free money. I think this is the idea that governments just give people jobs for, whatever. I think they'll call bullshit jobs. Like, you go, here's a new job, take that. And the federal one is basic income. And I love the idea of basic income. There's a few caveats that I think could be really dangerous with it, which not many people have thought about, not many people talk about. One is if it's issued by a central government, then it gives them massive control over the population. Because we're going to end up in a situation where there's still the 1%, or the 0.001% elite who control everything and own all the wealth. And then there'll be the 99.999% of the population living on a basic income. If you're the government and you're a future politician, you can just raise or lower that to control the masses. Another issue is that it has the potential to be a right-wing agenda where you end up essentially privatizing all other services that were previously provided by the government. Because, well, why do you need free healthcare when we've just given you money? Why don't you just go pay for your healthcare now? Good luck, mate. And other issues like it doesn't solve wealth inequality, it doesn't give people purpose, lots of things. And so my general thesis is that government cannot solve this issue, will not solve this issue. They've shown themselves time and time again to be just inefficient and just terrible. This doesn't mean I'm a pure hardcore libertarian, like that has its place. I subscribe to this idea of a social decentralism type model. And I definitely don't think politicians can solve it. The idea of having a top-down order of like a few people at the top somehow knowing how to manage this giant complex system we call 7 whatever billion people is impossible. And then you've got, so ultimately I think the issue really is that our economic system is failing us. It's got us so far, it's been great, it's provided us with abundance and overabundance and all this stuff. It's just not evenly distributed and it's a waste. I mean, fidget spinners, come on, they're cool, but like it's just a waste. It's just not working. And then on top of that, you've got massive wealth inequality. I mean, this is a system that kind of generates wealth inequality. So there's 8 people now control half of the world's wealth. Last year that took 62 people. So it's almost like an exponential trend. It's inevitable we're going to get to a point where one person controls most of the world's wealth, more than half, easily. Really bad. So what we really need is something like a peer-to-peer economy, an economy where it's self-aware of what we actually are passionate about. It helps route resources more efficiently, which is what capitalism is meant to do, but it really doesn't. And where there are no hierarchies, there is no exploitation. We can have everything that we want to have, and abundance, and exploration, and do awesome, amazing things, and free people from 9-to-5 jobs. That doesn't have these hierarchies, doesn't have a certain few people at the top. But how do we get there? Well, so what I'm working on is a thing called peerism, and so it's basically a protocol where let's work towards making that system. Let's work towards making a better economy. But you have to start somewhere first. So if you go online, you can find almost any number of people with their own economic ideologies and their own political ideologies and all that sort of stuff. I think the individual person the average person doesn't give a shit about political ideology, doesn't give a shit about economic ideology. At the end of the day, they only care about their own livelihoods, their own incomes, their ability to feed their family and do lots of things. So that's really the focus. It's like, how do we give everyone an income? Because that's really the first step towards something better. And then we have to leverage technology. So there's also a lot of I was at a socialism conference last week because I've been checking out all these different ideologies and stuff. Their approach doesn't use technology at all. It's just about striking and protesting and yeah, cool man, but it's technology here, it's exponential, it can scale, if you can get the right levers at play, it can be really powerful. So it's got to use technology, and it's got to be decentralized. So if you're trying to build a new economy, in the past, if you tried to build a brand new economy, if you tried to threaten the existing system and create your own currency, it would be centralized, so you could crush it. And that's what's happened in the past. We need a system where it can't be found, it can't be shut down. And this is what the blockchain provides. So the blockchain provides you the ability to create your own currency, to create your own economic policies, to create your own systems that don't sit anywhere. They're not on a server, they're distributed. So they can never be shut down by anyone, and they'll always exist forever. Like, as long as the internet exists, your services will. Okay, so how do we essentially, first step, how do we enable everyone to become a freelancer? I think if we can do that, we can decouple the employer-employee relationship, and we can start to free people from the slavery of these 9-to-5 jobs, which I think are very limiting to human potential. I mean, there's so many people I know, like pretty much all of my friends, and I'm sure you guys know as well, like, the moment they get a job, they don't have time to do anything else. They do their job, that's it. It's so limiting to human potential. And people have to do their job initially to get money, but then they get stuck in this trap where they end up spending up to their salary level, and we get in this rat race where there'd be so much human potential unlocked if we weren't working these 9-to-5 jobs for our corporate overlords. You might think differently, but like, you probably have a job. You've been stuck in that system. You're brainwashed. I'm sorry. Like, I've lived many different lives. I've managed to avoid a job, except for one job I got fired from. I was working 3 days a week. They wanted me to do 5. I said no, so they fired me. Otherwise, I've done freelancing consulting, which still sucks because it's hard to get jobs. So a better system would be to enable everyone to become a freelancer. It sucks on these freelance platforms because they're essentially two-sided marketplaces where their business model is on the employer side. They don't give a shit about the worker, which is why freelance.com, upwork.com, all these sites, mTurk, they're outsourcing first world work to the third world for $2, $3, $4 an hour. And obviously, that's why we're all still in jobs and we're not on those platforms. If we were on those platforms earning $50 an hour, we'd be there. So we need to make a system where it's like a role-playing game. You level up based on, on the task you do, and you get jobs just matched automatically to you. If you could just plug your phone, almost like being on Facebook or Reddit, and there's just immediately really good, interesting jobs that are matched to you that you want to do that pay well, you do it. You can learn from each other, so you can overthrow this kind of this education system where it's like do 4 years, then get a job. Instead it would be, okay, learn as you level up, as you're getting paid. You could have 14-year-olds, essentially getting paid to do real-world tasks that are valuable. So you could have a task fee where it's the same as like being on Reddit, being on Facebook, and then it's immediate. It's like, do you want to do this $100 task? It's actually interesting. Or do you want to do this $1,000 task? Sweet, yeah, I'll take it. And so the way we do this as well is really leveraging cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency can be a value thing, but cryptocurrency is also great for building two-sided marketplaces or two-sided social networks because you can incentivize the behavior you want on these platforms to get the flywheel spinning. I mean, like any social network is kind of useless unless people are on there posting and engaging. With cryptocurrency, you can actually have a system where you say, okay, if you do this thing I need you to do to make the system keep going, then I'll give you a token. The tokens will be worth nothing in the beginning, but because they might go up in value, like Ethereum, like Bitcoin, like all these other things, then you'll probably want to do that to earn those tokens. And so that's a great way to use it. And so then the next kind of iteration of this idea with Purism is to have skill currency, skill tokens, where tokens don't just represent money. I mean, when we think of Bitcoin, when we think of Ether, we think just pure money. They don't really have any other representation apart from like, oh look, I've got more Australian dollars worth, I've got more US dollars worth. Whereas what we're trying to do is that the more of these tokens you earn, that kind of represents your skill level. So if you've earned 9,000 3D printing tokens, your level in 3D printing is 9,000. If someone else has earned 5,000, then that's their level. And so I'm hoping that eventually, once this protocol's in place and people start using it, that you'll end up with almost like a more accurate resume of what your real skills are and everyone's skills. It's kind of like quantifying people's skill sets. So you might have 9,000 3D printing tokens and 4,000 design tokens and 2,000 marketing tokens and 500 fidget spinner tokens. Like these things can be made by anyone, and so they become these little economies. They're floating variable tokens, which represent a market cap for those little micro economies. And they represent your resume, and they're decentralized across different platforms. And then proof of skill. So we're working on this at the moment, like trying to work out, okay, well, you could just have people grind up from level 0 and do tasks for each other and earn them that way. But it would be better if you could have some system that works out, okay, this person actually has this skill level, we'll slot them into this point. And there's a lot of tricks with trying to prevent gaming with that. But yeah, so ultimately we're trying to build a protocol, not another marketplace that's all a siloed database. We want a protocol that's this open, decentralized system so that, you know, it's like HTTP, it's like www, it's like TCP/IP, the early internet protocols. These are permissionless things where anyone can plug in without having to ask. So you can have, you know, some app here and a platform here and another app here, and they're all plugged into the protocol. They haven't had to ask permission. You know, they haven't had to sign anything, they haven't had to get an API key, they just plug in and they can use it. And the cool thing about that is immediately, if someone posts a task here, all of these other ones immediately know it. Whereas the problem in the economy right now is, like, for example, if you want to get a website done, and you go to Acme Corp, you're like, I want a website done, they're like, okay, cool. Nobody else knows about you need a website done. You're going to go to every other platform, every other business and tell them the exact same thing. It's really inefficient. With this system, you can have a person immediately post a task, it's immediately routed to the person, you know, avoids all the salespeople, avoids all the managerial crap. You know, the job I was fired at, there was 20 people in this web design firm. They had 2 developers and 1 graphic designer. They were the guys that actually made the goddamn websites. The rest of the idiots were just like salespeople and marketing people who sat in between the customer and them. Like, you could make the economy so much more efficient and automate things faster. And so the final task, phase 2, is really about, like, okay, now we've got everyone with their skills are all quantified, we kind of know what their skill sets are. We've got tasks coming in, the tasks are being automatically matched to people who can just claim them immediately. People are earning enough money to, like, you know, just start thinking about, okay, maybe, you know, it's a good side gig. The next step is like, well, okay, let's scale it up. Now let's put a commons-owned bot marketplace in the middle so that anyone can create a bot that automates a task. And all these tasks are coming in and they're public. So within, say, the 3D printing community, you'll have a list of, like, here's the most popular common tasks that have been requested this month. So you can create, if you can create a bot that can solve that, go ahead and make it, get some other mates involved, you know, co-creators, make that bot. Then when the task comes in, it throws it at the bots. If the bots can solve it, sweet. As a creator, you get some of that profit, but the majority of it then gets reinvested back into the community as a bit of a basic income. So this is how we do a decentralized basic income without having to fund it through taxes and government and all that sort of thing. And the cool thing about that is, like, it's almost like these bots will be commons owned in the sense that they're not owned by an individual, they're owned by everyone, and so they can't be exploited, which is really what Elon Musk is doing with OpenAI. You can see that AI eventually is going to be owned by corporate entities, by Google, by Facebook, by Amazon, and they'll control it, you know, and they'll charge you a fee to use it, and Google said this, but they'll control it, and so humanity loses as a result of that. Yeah, so we share profits back, and that's really the idea. And then we can, once that system is in place, once that foundational system is in place, then we can start exploring, okay, well, now how do we, you know, reconfigure society? How do we do more interesting things? How do we do things like peer production? This is a Reddit experiment they did for, I think, April Fools, where everyone got to add 1 pixel. So this is hundreds of thousands of people working together, forming this complex and emerging complexity. And I think this is where society needs to go. This is where, once everyone is free from this kind of enslavement of hierarchical jobs, and we're free to do what we want to do, pursue our own passions and our own interests, this is what could happen. We could crowdfund space programs. We could do amazing things because people will have time to do what they want to do rather than doing what they have to do to survive. So if you want to check out more ideas, I've got some stuff here. These are a few articles I've written recently that are pretty exciting. Otherwise, check out Greenup. So yeah, thanks guys.
Do you guys have any questions for Nathan while Max sets up?
In this model, how do you see the impact or the ability for people to actually multiply their efforts? So I think one of the things that traditionally we see is people learn and continue to do their work and develop their skills, with the end goal obviously being able to multiply those, have a multiplier effect on their time. How do you see that factoring into this model?
In terms of being able to earn money while they sleep type thing, or?
Yes and no. Like there needs to be more than a linear relationship to your time and income.
Yep.
And even still in this model, which you're kind of indicating, you're almost self-imposing this model where, as I understand it, you don't make any money unless you're actually exchanging time for money. And that's the part I'm kind of curious about.
Also, I'm trying to there's no attention economy involved. So there are a few other blockchain-based startups that I know of that are doing attention-based, like time-based, tokenizing time. I really don't like the idea of that because I think, automation, robots are going to be, AI is going to be way faster than you at any particular task. And we don't want this system where, I don't want to end up in a system where people are working more hours for less pay, which is really what is happening with freelance platforms at the moment. Because if you're working for $2 an hour, then you're going to do more hours to make a livable income. So with this system, the hope is trying to flip that model so that if employers pay more money, you'll be matched to higher skills. And that's a complete assumption that would happen. Employers might continue just to pay the lowest possible thing they can to get to it, whatever. So I hope they'll flip the model on the bench. You're going to go over time.
Yeah. And also, we've got a panel later, so any other questions, we can definitely address them. Speaking of time, I have 15 minutes and 30 slides, so let's get into it. The first thing, questions. If there's something that relates to what I'm talking about, please ask it. I am not infallible, as you will learn. If you're thinking something, other people will be thinking it, and we want everyone to get something out of it, so please ask questions. This is about 2/3 decentralizing democracy, about 1/3 flux, and I wanted to mention that I don't like the term decentralizing democracy because it's explanationless, which is a thing that we're going to come into very soon. That it focuses on an outcome without an explanation. So, let's get into it. Let's experiment with decentralizing democracy. First thing, we've got a plan. Once per week, we're going to ask a random voter about an issue, or once per day. We're going to ask a random voter about an issue, and then we'll ask another random voter about how to solve it. Sweet, we're done! We've decentralized democracy. This is the most decentralized form of democracy you could possibly find, and yet we all expect it to be absolutely terrible. And so there's no reason that just decentralizing democracy for the sake of it would ever offer good results. We need something that's a lot deeper than that, and that is what this talk is about. So essentially, what I'm saying here is that we can't do good things without high-quality explanations. Is that when we build a system like this, the explanations that we use that inform us of how it should be built need to be robust. This is a pretty big problem in pro-democracy or pro-reform democracy groups at the moment, in that they don't have these sort of very deep explanations. And we know that because their systems of democracy look exactly like the old systems of democracy, except they're on a blockchain. And now it's decentralized. So essentially, most of the suggestions out there are either explanationless or use refuted explanations. That's my claim, at least. And we're going to go through some of those in this talk. And essentially, what this means is that we have to really understand the problem that we're trying to solve and use the best explanations that we have access to if we want to actually solve them for good. If you like, easy example off the top of your head, if you have a cancer that's metastasized and you remove the biggest tumor, then that's great. You might live a bit longer, but you're still going to succumb to that eventually, right? If you want to actually survive in that case, you need a much better explanation about what you need to do to not die. And what I propose is that I'm going to suggest the introduction to such an explanation. But to do that, and to understand why some explanations can be high quality and why some can be low quality and things like that, we have to look at a bit of epistemology. So to start with, most people, and I include pretty much everyone here in that, unless you've read The Beginning of Infinity, as I'll touch on at the end, most people are really bad at critical thinking because they've never studied it. As in, to actually understand why some ideas are correct and why some ideas aren't, is not only something that is incredibly, abstract, and so requires a lot of thought, but it also, there's something that we just didn't have access to before about 1940, when Karl Popper really started, producing a lot of philosophical writing. So it's not something that if you go into philosophy that comes before that, you've got justified true belief, all that sort of stuff, that's way up. The main thing, if you take one thing away from this talk, then, in terms of epistemology, ideas and explanations are either refuted or non-refuted. There's no middle ground. There is no middle ground. And essentially, the amount of evidence has nothing to do with whether an explanation is correct or not. Right? Newton's theory of gravity still has a literal shit ton of evidence. But it's wrong, and we know it's wrong, and we understand why it's wrong because we now understand general relativity. Before that, it was the best guess we had, and we were very justified in following its advice. But once we came up with a better idea, we needed to move on to that better idea. So essentially, if we want to solve problems, we need to seek solutions to those problems, and we have to be okay with finding solutions that we don't like. And there's no reason that our preference for a solution has anything to do with whether it's true or not. Right? This is a really deep point that I think most people don't really internalize yet. Is that what we think about the world, what we want to feel, literally has no connection to what the truth is. And if we don't acknowledge that, then we're going to keep making systems of democracy that are still broken in the same ways. And unless we acknowledge, the best knowledge that we have about it and use that to construct a better system, we're going to make the same mistakes. So, objective truth exists. I'm not going to go into it here, but there's a good resource I look at the end. We can get closer to the objective truth, so we can't access objective truth directly, but we can get closer to it, and the way we do that is through improving our explanations of the world. So there's no such thing as like a perfect explanation. Every explanation has a problem. It's not exactly the way reality works, but we can make them better. And if we want solutions to any problems that we ultimately perceive, we have to focus on the explanations that give us an understanding to that problem, and again, we don't get to choose how those things form. At the end of the day, if we have poor explanations, we're not going to be able to solve problems, or at the very least, we can sometimes, like with a bad explanation, we can sometimes partly solve the problem, as I'll look at in a minute, but you can't create an enduring solution. So where democracy comes in. So if we want democracy to solve problems, then it can't be about the will of the people. As if you want democracy to be about the will of the people, that's fine, but you have to understand that it doesn't solve problems then, it just does what people want. Now there's a technicality here, which is that if everyone was a really amazing fallibilist and knew everything in the world, then we could maybe unify the two, but that's not a reality that really matters. Or is it all possible? So here on the left, the right, is essentially how this breaks down. So we have, on the left, we have what people want. On the right, we have solutions to problems. And there's only a very small intersection in between. And particularly here, all of the things that people want that aren't solutions are essentially mistakes that we could have avoided had we been less, egotistical about the solutions we chose. And everything on the right, in that green, is solutions that we didn't use that we already had. And in the middle is the very slow progress, which I think is one of the things that's frustrating to most people about democracy today. So we can't unify these two, but we can get closer. And so if we create a system that produces better solutions or biases better solutions, right, then we can maximize that overlap. And I think that's really important, is we need to know that the solution, whatever system of democracy we create, it has to relate very deeply with the idea of epistemology and the idea of coming up with solutions to problems. So, explanationalist democracies, or democracies which use refuted explanations, can easily decentralize democracy, but it doesn't at all guarantee that democracy will be good, is, I guess, the takeaway from that section. Just to get an idea, who's heard of Lawrence Lessig? Is that Creative Commons? He ran for president. We've got like 6 people. Okay, well, I guess this isn't the Creative Commons meetup, so that's fair enough. Lawrence Lessig is a lawyer and academic in the US. He has a lot of good ideas. Creative Commons is great. He's worked on a number of different projects across the internet, and he recently ran for president. Now, he wants to remove corruption by removing money. Essentially, I'm simplifying a bit, but that's essentially it. And there's this thesis that he has that money and influence corrupts politics. Now, I don't disagree with that. It seems a reasonably fair statement. And his solution is to reform campaign financing and improve voter access. Now, that doesn't, I'm going to go through and criticize this. I don't think that these are bad things, but as we'll find out, I don't think that they solve the problem. So, here's a quote from an article that he wrote in the Rolling Stone. So, the great threat today is instead in plain sight. All right, there's some pretext that I always need to include. It is the economy of influence now, transparent to all, which has normalized a process that draws our democracy away from the will of the people. And I've emphasized that because that is a massive red flag right there. for reasons that we've already discussed. This is from essentially a summary, but it's quite good. He ran on a platform of electoral reform. His proposed Citizen Equality Act outlined a plan to fix gerrymandering, protect voting rights, and reduce the power of big money in politics. Now, these are all good ideas. None of that I disagree with, as in, I think that that's probably a good thing to implement, and it probably will help in some way, because we can observe that it helps in other countries, but those countries still have corruption. And so obviously, it doesn't solve the problem. And this is because Lessig, at least in this form, I don't know actually what he thinks, inside his own head, but in terms of what he's published, it doesn't seem that he actually understands where corruption comes from. And so if you're interested in figuring out how to solve the problem of corruption, we need a deeper understanding. And essentially, his explanation, or the implicit explanation in what I've just shown you, is refuted with better explanations. So, understanding corruption. I'm going to go through this reasonably quickly because I can spend a lot of time on it. There's a link at the end to a fantastic 20-minute video that I encourage you to watch if you're interested. This is something called the selectorate theory. And basically, it talks about a ruler, the guy at the top. And the number one job of the ruler is to stay being the ruler. Now, I think this is fairly straightforward. If you stop being the ruler, then you can't do anything. So, obviously, you want to keep doing it. And essentially, the first thing that they need to do is make sure that they have the support of the people that could possibly remove it. Now, regardless of what society we live in, there are power structures, there are other things, there are people who have more power and influence than everyone else, and you want them on your side. If they're not on your side, then they're going to attack you, and of course, being the ruler, you're essentially the most vulnerable person, or at least not the biggest target. So the second rule of the selectorate theory is to use the treasure to buy and maintain power. In a dictatorship, this is quite straightforward. You use gold or oil or things like that, bribery, whatever. In a democracy, it becomes a bit more complex. Rule 3 is to minimize the keys, and essentially that way you can maximize the reward for each key. That's how you maintain a very stable power base. The treasure in this case is legislative influence. It's things like government contracts, it's influence, it's all that sort of stuff. All the things that we hear about where it's not actual money changing hands, but it doesn't necessarily feel right. So democratic leaders still need to be corrupt, whether they want to be or not, because if they're not, someone else will be. And this is a reality of every power structure, right? The keys themselves are in themselves a small power structure, right? You can think about strata boards or deans of universities, everything like that all apply, these rules all apply because they are rules of power. And if we are looking to understand the system of democracy and understand corruption, then we need to engage with power in a very deep way. Yeah, if they try not to be corrupt, if they try to be altruistic, someone else will win the key, support, take power, usurp them, that sort of thing. So corruption exists because power acts on rulers, not the other way around. Right, now rulers can wield power, that's fine, but this is a point that most people don't consider. And so if you're constructing a system of democracy, you need to be aware that whatever you're constructing, if you're essentially giving authority to someone based on some criterion, then that is going to affect them. And so if you want good policy and if you want to solve problems, right, this is essentially the first problem you need to deal with. Corruption, in a democracy, corruption is a tool. And that is something that is probably the biggest takeaway from the selectorate theory is corruption is a tool, and if you let people wield it, they have to wield it. Now, corruption in this case is enabled by essentially an unbridled authority. And so, as we'll see, this has to do with the very nature of having a democracy at all and the way that we construct that. I give an hour-long lecture that if you want to know more about that, you can look there. And basically, the main part of this solution is that we have to be able to remove this authority, or at least this form of authority, because without doing that, we're definitely not going to be able to solve all of those other issues we just covered. Lessig doesn't acknowledge this, and so his solution can never fully work. Right, now that doesn't mean you shouldn't support him in his presidential run if you happen to be able to vote for him, but we need to be aware that there are lots of intelligent people with good ideas and good hearts that are going to be totally ineffective if they get their way. And it's because of mistakes like this. So, on to democracy. I'm jumping the gun. Usually I go through a bit of a motion before I introduce the term static majoritarianism. But static majoritarianism is pretty straightforward. If the set of voters is the same all the time, and you have a majoritarian system, then that's static majoritarianism. So if we all took a vote now about whose favorite fruit it is, and then we took a vote about what we should do Wednesday, we're in a static majoritarian system. Now, here, it's obviously, we're not, playing for sheep station, so it's okay. But in a democracy, we are, and that's really important. And particularly, in a static majoritarianism democracy, the optimum strategy in every one is to become the biggest bloc, is to be the biggest group of voters. And if you are the biggest group of voters, say you're over 50%, then you have, you alone have the decision-making power. And those other 49.9% of people have no decision-making power. Static majoritarianism enables corruption through this idea of consistent and exclusive rights to power. I feel like I covered that. It exists in direct democracy. An example of an organisation, online direct democracy. They operate out of Queensland. They run Australian federal things. Liquid democracy, like Democracy Earth, still static majoritarian. You delegate to people and things like that. That's nice. There's a little bit of specialisation, but the set of voters is always the same issue to issue. There's representative democracy, which is of course what we have now. And then there's ideas like tiered councils and experts. There's an organisation down in Melbourne called LIBO that is trying to do this sort of thing. And the problem with all of these systems is static majoritarianism. And so without changing the set of voters that participate in each issue, we have no chance to eliminate the sort of authority that leads to corruption. And even if we take measures against each instance of corruption, which we can do, we will always have more instances of corruption with which to fight. So, over here on the right is, I think I have another, yeah, there we go. Okay, so over here on the right, this is essentially what we actually have, right? So I say none of the old ways can solve the problems of corruption, and what we have is actually on the right. It wasn't the diagram I showed you before. If some of you might be aware of a Princeton study in 2014, I think, that correlated about 50 years of voter opinion data against the results of Congress in the states, and they found that the correlation between how average voters felt about the policy that was passed had literally nothing to do with the policy that was passed. However, if you correlated the opinion of economic elites instead, then you had this really nice linear line. And so what we see is that the policy we enact is not even the will of the people, it's not what people want, and it's not solutions to problems. There is some overlap there, so we still get some progress, and sometimes people are happy with the solution without actually implementing a real solution. But I think this is a pretty big problem. So, now on to flux. That's a bit of an overview of the problem. This is how we deal with it. So the first thing is we start with a direct democracy. This is not for the main reason that people would start with this. This is because the source of new knowledge is unpredictable. And that's just a really, I guess it's quite profound, but if you could predict the next source of new knowledge with great accuracy, then essentially that prediction would be the discovery in and of itself. And so if we're talking about really novel ideas, then you can't exclude anyone because you don't know who to exclude or who to include. We build a system on top of that then biases better explanations and thus better solutions. Now, the actual mechanics of that are a bit too long for this talk, but I encourage you to look into it more if you're interested. Essentially, we use slide after this. So, flux is a proxy party for a new system of democracy. Essentially, this system of democracy is called issue-based direct democracy. So, basically, over the past 18 months, we've developed this. Candidates are elected as a pass-through. It's pretty straightforward. They just vote however the system comes out. So, issue-based direct democracy, the more interesting slide. We use a very well-crafted and very particular economic system, closed off from any other economic system, that creates opportunity cost between issues. And that's really the significant point there, is in every static majoritarian system, there is no opportunity cost between issues. You don't lose anything for participating in an issue that you don't care about, whereas in issue-based direct democracy, you do. You actively lessen your own ability to change the things you care about if you don't interfere with someone else's business. So we also use specialization in trade. This is for any economists in the room. This is, literally the first and second lecture of your economics course. And comparative advantage, which probably takes a little bit longer to get to, but ties into opportunity cost quite well. So this is a long sentence, so we'll go through it slowly. By associating a dynamic political cost to conjecture, which is in this case suggesting new ideas, suggesting new policies, by associating a cost to suggesting new policies, and also by associating a cost to voting against policies, or trying to remove someone else's policy, by creating those opportunity costs, the optimum strategy becomes produce the best policy. Yo.
Sorry, can I jump in? So with same-sex marriage, there's a lot of people who are vehemently against that, and there's a small amount of people that really, really care about it. Would this backfire for them?
So I write a little bit, I've got some quite long essays about the actual various economic cases that can come through here. So this is one where you have, presumably, because the explanations from both sides are mutually exclusive, you either have a situation where one side has a terrible explanation, one side has a good explanation, or where they've both got bad explanations. And the end result of this through our economic system is essentially a war of attrition. Now, the way I sort of personally look at it is that it's going to be about the side that gives up first, essentially, and there's going to be like a long-term tax on both those people, both those groups, for pursuing that issue with such vigor. Now, the way that works out, I mean, I said this system bias is a good explanation, so I'll let you draw your own conclusions.
Do city-states play a part in what you're putting together? Like, is the idea that maybe if the laws apply to smaller areas and smaller localities, that you could get optimal by people moving to the better policy places?
So, I guess there's a few ways to answer this question. I thought a lot about the idea of using this for essentially international politics. Maybe we can talk more about that in the panel. One thing though is, we essentially set each democracy to the jurisdictions that it's hosted in at this point. Everyone within Australia would be able to, by voting in a flux candidate, would be able to participate in a big sort of ecosystem that incorporates the entirety of Australia. But you've got to be an electorate where you vote in the flux candidate to participate. In terms of essentially, it's one of the really neat properties about the system is that it scales to whatever size of the population that you want. Now, I suspect that it breaks down at low populations just because of the effort to reward ratio, but once you go over a few thousand people, then I think it'll probably work in any context.
I'm just kind of curious, you've defined this as produce the best policy, and I'm kind of curious more from a mathematical standpoint, this feels more like a definition of an optimum consensus on an issue rather than defining best in some sort of...
So that's quite interesting. I would suggest that pretty much every decision made by issue-based direct democracy does not agree with typical mathematical analysis on the way that consensus works. And in fact, I don't talk about it here, but I think consensus is a really, really, really bad idea. Because you only ever get consensus after it's become so evident that what you're talking about is right, that at the end of the day, if we want to solve problems quickly, we're not going to have consensus. And we don't want consensus because that's a burden. What we do want to do is iterate on different policies to come up with the best policies possible, try them as soon as possible, see what works, see what's refuted, and ultimately try and implement solutions. And waiting for consensus is maybe a bit too slow for that. There's plenty of issues now where the scientific consensus, but not political consensus. Consensus is a loaded term, essentially. Anyway, I'd recommend you look into the beginning of Infinity about that. In terms of best, there is a very precise definition of best. In this case, it means hard to vary. As in, basically, you can't change anything about the policy without breaking it, and provided that you then base it on very specific explanations that are also good in the same way, as in, you can't alter them without breaking them, then those things, while they're not true by that merit, we know that they are, as in if you don't have those properties, then that idea is definitely false. And so we've sort of ruled out a whole lot of bad policy by saying, okay, this thing needs to be based on good explanations. Anyway, let's talk more about it later because I'm taking too much time. So, predictions about issue-based direct democracy. So, we get much better policy. We actually get solutions. It's implemented faster when it's good, and it's removed faster when it's bad. The corollaries of these are also true, as in that when you have bad policy, if you want to try and push it through, it becomes slower and more expensive to do so. And removing good policy likewise becomes slower and more expensive. Minorities are empowered with self-determination. So the key word here, minorities, we're all minorities. As in, I'm a programmer, I do casual economics. I, play Magic the Gathering. All of those things are minorities. There's a bunch of majorities I'm involved in, but I don't, like, it's the issues that I really care about and that drive me have to do with things that only a small percentage of people care about. And I think that that's true for pretty much every issue that we deeply care about, is that we're not getting on board with, like 60% of the population to go to a rally, we're getting on board with, maybe 2% of the population. And so everything, I don't just mean, for example, Indigenous Australians or a particular community. I mean everyone in this case. And self-determination is really important when you've got policy that matters to you and other people are screwing up. And then consistent progress. This is something that can only be achieved through acknowledging, understanding the knowledge creation process and trying to maybe optimize for that is the wrong term, but basically internalizing that and trying to make it work as much as possible. So, implementation. So we have blockchain-based governance via Secure Vote. Secure Vote is a product that my startup makes, essentially. It nicely separates out the voting tech from the political stuff. We've got this idea, it's very new. We used to have this, we used to try and stay out of the policy generation side, but we've maybe come up with an idea for how to do decentralized policy generation in what is essentially an open discussion forum, but also an open discussion forum where you don't have trolls because it's too expensive to be a troll, but it's very cheap to be productive. It has to be linked to the economic system of issue-based direct democracy. I don't have any more details now, but it's something to look out for. And the other thing is start lots of parties, run in every election, keep doing that until you start winning. That seems to be the only way for a small party to win. That's what the Greens did for 10 years. That's what we'll do, hopefully, for less than 10 years. So decentralizing democracy and issue-based direct democracy. So this is essentially getting to the summary section. So IBD decentralizes democracy. You may have guessed that from the title. But it doesn't decentralize democracy because we wanted it to. It's an emergent property. And this idea of emergence is, I think, something that's really important. Often we think about what we want in a system, and we go out and we design a system around that. But as I pointed out originally, it's very easy to design a decentralized system of democracy that's quite useless, right? And so the idea of emergence here is really encouraging, because our intuition says that, well, decentralization seems good for a collective decision-making mechanism. And this just fell out. This wasn't something that I wanted in it. It was just that everything that I knew about epistemology and economics and everything else meant that we needed to include everyone and it needed to be decentralized. So, yeah, decentralized democracy for the sake of it is not going to work. You can apply this to anything. Removing corruption for the sake of it is not going to work. We need much, much deeper understanding and explanations. So, summary. We need to engage critically to find solutions, and there is no reason that we should like those solutions. This is, I think, really important because often we get emotionally tied up in this sort of thing, and our identity is tied up in the sort of things that we believe are true. And for me, at least, it was very liberating once I was able to extricate my identity from the explanations and the worldview that I had. And I think that's quite important. So I'd encourage you all to maybe reflect on that a bit. If we're interested in truth and knowledge, then we can't do anything else other than this. Because you don't get to choose what the truth is. The truth was here before and will be here after us. Finding it is the interesting part. And continual progress is possible by a continual progress of creating new knowledge. And so if we want continual progress in our democracy, then we better have that one. New systems of democracy or plans, most of them don't critically engage with the real problems, with a really deep understanding of those problems. So they won't work, and we shouldn't expect them to work. Decentralization, I've said that twice. Just skip over it. So we use a new system of democracy, issue-based direct democracy. It might work. Like I'm not claiming that it's going to work because it's never been tested. But I have strong reasons to suspect it'll work, and I have strong reasons to believe that most other systems will fail where issue-based direct democracy might not. And because it uses good explanations. So selectorate theory, economics, basics, fallibilism, all of that sort of stuff, understanding power, all of that goes into it. Not to mention the blockchain stuff on the back end that helps it work. Those things that I just mentioned. And because it embodies the knowledge creation process, which is conjecture and criticism. By the way, so evolution is just conjecture and criticism. Mutation is criticism, is conjecture. Death is criticism. It goes on in our own mind where we come up with ideas. We go through this process of, thinking of stuff. Sometimes a good one pops out and then we go talk to our friend, and then sometimes they shoot it down, and sometimes they're like, hey, I can't find a hole in this. Conjecture and criticism, they're the two key things in knowledge creation. So, this is the last slide. These are all like the bibliography and the links and things. If you want to take a photo of anything, take a photo of this. The Beginning of Infinity is big and yellow because that is literally the most important book that I've ever read. And if there is one book that you read in the rest of your life, it should be that one. So please go and have a look into it. It goes through fallibilism, particularly theory of knowledge, that sort of stuff. Anyway, there's some other stuff. Fallibleideas.com, good site. Elliot Temple, Barbarian Philosopher. There's, Flux links at the bottom. There's my emails, stuff like that. Anyway, so thank you, everyone. By the way, I have to put in a plug. Flux is trying to register a New South Wales party. We need essentially 750 stat decks to do that. So if you're interested in supporting us, that would be really neat. Come talk to us after.
Any questions for Max while Meow sets up? Or sorry, Shane?
Yep. Your second last slide there, you said, it might work, you don't know. Following on from your proper comments, what are the principles of falsification? Have you thought what could prove wrong, and are you pursuing them?
Yeah, so we have thought a bit about that. One of the questions we get asked is why haven't we tested it? And the answer is because we don't have an appropriate test bed yet. We have several different plans working on different avenues for how to test it. But essentially, if we're using a system that's based on economic principles, we can't use play money here type thing. We can't use play issues. We need things that actually matter to people because the properties only emerge when people feel that they need to creatively engage and need to really consider how they spend their resources. And if they don't do that, then all we have is this random protocol that just fires noise. And it's only when we really get that deep interaction that we can see those properties emerge. How are we doing on time, Peter, by the way? I don't.
It's fine.
Okay, cool. Should we go back?
You need to go to the toilet, go to the toilet.
Yeah,
you need to grab a beer.
Grab a beer on up next. Make sure.
Yeah. You don't want to miss me out.
Could you use this model for businesses? Could you run a business under this model and test it on that? Does it need to be a business?
Okay, so the question is, can you use this for decision making in a company? Maybe it depends on the company. One of the crucial things here is opportunity cost between issues. And what that means is that if you don't have an ecosystem of issues, then it'll just basically be a normal democracy. And there's no reason to suspect that it'll be better than a normal decision-making process. If you had something like General Electric where they have just a massive panoply of products, it might work, but the problem with companies that make lots and lots of different diverse things is they're also incredibly valuable, so they're probably not, knocking on the door to try and change all the decision
You
making.
can have like big four consultancies who have individual businesses inside of them competing for making the company more money.
So that's possible. It would be interesting to sort of use an economic test case to look at. One of the other things is this has to be enduring. As in, this doesn't work on one issue. It works a little bit, but on the long term, to maximize specialization and output, we need it to be an enduring thing. So that sort of becomes a bit difficult there as well. But we can talk about it more at the panel if you like.
Have you looked into much about economic theory around World of Warcraft? Because
as in like the hyperinflation of gold and stuff like that?
Yes, because what you're talking about and the question about could you do this in business in real world, as you just said, that probably wouldn't work. But in a fake world like that, with competing interests and ideas and people feel very strongly, because those, cave dwellers actually care about that shit. World of Warcraft's fake, but it actually might be the right test bed. All the things you talked about.
It'd be an interesting test bed, and I think it would actually probably work. I was actually thinking about this a little while ago, but I think we have systems that are lower friction to implement it in, essentially to start with, so we're not focusing on that, but I think it would work.
Just like OpenAI and StarCraft, and also it seems like a really interesting place.
Yeah, particularly you need something like World of Warcraft where you have a persistent universe, and you have an ongoing thing that people are connected with for months or years.
Elite Dangerous or...
No, exactly, something like that. Elite Dangerous or EVE Online, yeah, exactly. That would be a very interesting case. I'm not sure if we can convince them, but and writing our own game is probably a bit too much overhead. But no, that's definitely something that we're interested in.
So, in the model of, I'm only going to vote on something that's important to me, things become more important to me the more I see things swinging the other way.
Yes.
So, how do you kind of scale that of, people are, as long as they think they're winning, they don't feel like they need to.
So I guess, so the question is essentially, you put more effort in when you're losing, sort of thing. The way that our system works is, so I'll just go really high level economics, like quite quick. We have two kinds of tokens, right? Voting tokens and liquidity tokens. Voting tokens are instantiated, like there's a particular type of voting token made each time there's a new issue, and they're specific to that issue. There's only one type of liquidity token, and all voting tokens can be traded for liquidity tokens on the market, and vice versa, right? When the process of acquiring these voting tokens goes on during the last stages of, and this is the current construction, this might change, goes on during the last stages of the ballot on whether this thing should pass or not. And you do this by bidding on a specially crafted auction system that basically seeks to maximize the amount of information present and also discourage people from like sniping auctions sort of thing, for example. So the idea is to have like high, accurate, consistent information throughout this auction. When you make a bid, you have to declare which way your vote goes. And so you can't actually attempt to acquire votes without declaring how you're going to use them. And basically through making as much information as accessible as possible, which in terms of economic theory increases the ability to find prices. This is basically the way that we enable people to act on that level of information and to know how things are going on, and then they have a way, a method, a chance to act in opposition if it's not going the right way. The corollary to this is that if we didn't have good price finding, then often people in these situations might, or political organizations that want a particular outcome, might overspend. They might spend too much liquidity tokens and then end up winning the vote by 25%, which is useless because obviously they had to buy more buy more of the voting tokens in that regard than they would have otherwise. And of course, I just want to mention, I'm using words like buy and sell and stuff. There's no cash involved in this. We cut off the cash economy without very, very significant effort by basically disabling, like there's no send function. You can't send voting tokens to anyone, you can't send liquidity tokens to anyone. You can only use them through the auction system or by voting. And so it becomes, and because of our anonymization technology, it becomes very difficult to actually prove one way or the other. So basically you can't use cash to influence things. So the corollary being that we want the markets to be as efficient as possible because people don't waste resources that way. So I hope that answers the question. We can talk more later if that's sufficient.
Yeah. Is there a total amount of, like a static total amount of tokens within the system?
This is an interesting question. Is there a static total amount of tokens? No. In fact, we use something that I don't know if it's ever been experimented with before. We have constant high inflation on the liquidity tokens. So I'm thinking about 30% a year is good. Now, the reason for this is that it pushes, basically we create, say at the end of every year we create 30% extra tokens based on the supply, liquidity tokens. We then redistribute this evenly across all voters, universal basic income style, as we'll hear in a moment, which I should probably, go sit down pretty soon. What we do then, though, is to avoid people losing the ability to intuit prices, is that we denominate everything in terms of percentage of the whole, not in terms of units. And so you have like one liquidity token maybe, but that's like 0.01 points sort of thing is in percentage points, and all the prices are denominated in points. And so they're always relative to the total. Now that means that your balance will change over time just from using it or not using it, but the ability to ensure prices remains and is maintained in that property. Anyway, any more questions we'll talk about on the panel. I really need to sit down, so cheers.
That's right, we probably won't have a panel, but if you have any questions, just ask them at the bar. Panel at the pub, that's right. So that way we don't get kicked out. So next up we've got Meow. Like I said, if you need to use the bathroom, use the bathroom. Over here if you need. We're just going to be switching laptops because apparently we can't share these slides out. So for the other slides, we'll be posting at our meetup group, just on the link. But for Meow slides, it's for your eyes only. What about the stream? Meow, what about the stream?
Yeah, I'll be like 2 seconds.
I mean, what about the live stream? We should
Live stream's fine.
Live stream's fine?
I just don't want to give anyone my slides.
So we're Facebook live streaming from the flux.org website. And Max, what was the tagline for flux.org again?
He's gone to the bathroom.
He's gone to the bathroom? Okay. Spoiler alert, it's flux the system. Okay. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for meow-ludo.
So I just got back from DEF CON at the end of July, and while I was over there, I was lucky enough to meet Rich Lee. Rich Lee is world famous for making a product called the Lovetron 9000. It's a vibrating cock implant. And he introduced me to this idea of black hat transhumanism. I was giving a talk on DIY bioweapons, and I started doing a bit of research, and I thought, everyone's talking about how we use blockchain to make things better. I'm like, what about if you just want to be really evil and kill everyone? All once. So I thought I'd give a presentation now about that, because there's only 2 of us in the world. Hopefully after tonight there'll be a few more. Okay, so Peter was talking before about one approach of transhumanism, which is about super well-being, super longevity, super intelligence. I generally come from the point of Ray Kurzweil, which is about the technologies that drive that. So there's a lot of crossover, but basically I think about it as a convergence of genetics, nanotech, and robotics. And by robotics, it kind of is actually AI, not robotics. And they basically say we can use this to exceed human capabilities. Does anyone know who this song is?
Still up.
Hey! Oh, there we go. Oh, no, this is not on my computer.
Oh, sorry.
So this is Stark. I was lucky enough to meet Stark and do some of his lab work for an exhibition that he had at Museum of MCA, yeah. So basically this is an exhibition he did in like the 70s. I talked to him about the grinding idea with different pieces of technology. And he's like, oh, we've been doing that for 40 years. Oh, by the way, if anyone wants to scream out or disrupt, you're more than welcome to start time of the night. So he basically made a robotic arm that attaches onto his arm, and then with his left hand he writes the human bit, and then the 2 hands write different things at the end. And this is black hat transhumanism is basically saying it won't be the humans, it will only be fusions of man and machine, or just machine. Okay, so we talk about transhumanism, and we're like, okay, so the goal is that, you know, machines can become super intelligent, and they can help us out and do all our stuff. But I think the final goal of transhumanism is actually the end of the human race, as we know it. So there may be humans around, but it won't be anywhere like we think. And anyone that doesn't join along and join with the machines is basically fucked. So you might have seen something like this, you know, intellect versus time, the old hockey-shaped graph that every startup likes to use. Except this one's true. And then we've got this. So this intersection is really important. So this is when machine intelligence matches human intelligence. So people call this a singularity. There's different people have different ideas with varying religiosity about what the singularity is. But we'll just say for this point, this is when humans and machines are as smart as each other. I think at this day, another thing's going to happen. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a biologist, not a technologist the way that most people in this room probably are. So I come at this with a very different perspective. Okay, so this graph is called a selective sweep. Basically, we're not going to say chromosome separation, we're saying genetic diversity over time. So you'll notice it's kind of the inverse of that graph. And it basically says that this is like genetic diversity now, and this is like anyone that doesn't join the singularity is dead. Everyone that joined it survives afterwards. We get the same diversity back. So we've seen this before. So everyone sitting in this room, because the little party's not here, basically during the evolution of Homo sapiens, there was 17 separate mutations that happened in one generation. And basically a human woke up surrounded by chimps and went, what the fuck is happening? And all of us are descendants of that. And those are all involved in brain development. it's an incredibly unusual event, but if we know anything from evolution, incredibly unusual events happen, and they give birth to everything that comes after it, and that diagram is that selective suite. So it might be like a bacterial population that got hit by an antibiotic, or in our case, it's a technological event so jarring that if you didn't, you're basically selected out by it if you're not on board with it, which is a bit terrifying. Okay, so I'm just going to come back to this. So my problem with this is that we're saying, you know, genetics, nanotechnology, robotics are going to allow us to do all this cool stuff, eliminate disease, redesign and rebuild our bodies. But if we've got AI in charge, there's a big problem, which is that this is a humanist view. This is what we're thinking about how this is going down. But AI might have a very different idea about what it wants. In fact, you know, we've got people like Elon Musk, etc., all calling out for that. And with good reason, they're saying, you know, maybe we should like check what it's doing. So, how do we use this for fun and profit? Okay, so obviously I'm a biohacker, so I'm going to start with genetics. Also grinding, which is putting technology in. I'm about halfway through my presentation, by the way. This is pretty quick. In the background, it's actually got a picture of my favourite movie, Resident Evil, with the T-virus. Okay, so bioweapons is the obvious one. If we're interested, vaccinations are really good. So we already kind of wage this war in Byron Bay right now. We do it by getting vaccinations and letting them die of preventable diseases, but we can design. We all know it's true. So actually, just on that note, when I was doing my research for my bioweapons presentation at DEF CON, I'm like, if your kid's unvaccinated, that's a bioweapon. That's illegal. If anyone wants to carry my surrogate. Vaccinations are awesome. They're basically a defense force against the weapon that you have. Easy ones are, smallpox, anthrax, botulinum toxin. So these are all like, smallpox is eradicated, but there's still a few reserves. Vaccinia, the vaccine against smallpox, for any biologists in the room, has 90% sequence homology to smallpox. 187,000 base pairs. If you want to make smallpox, it would be ridiculously easy. Someone already made horsepox this year. It was basically smallpox, but not smallpox. It's horses. They built it from scratch. So this can be done. Anthrax is really easy to get a hold of, easy to weaponize. Botulinum toxin is the same. Weaponized gene drives, I'll talk about them a little bit in a future slide. 0-day implants. So I've been thinking, like, you know, maybe if I was a distributor, which I am, of implantable technology, maybe I know a 0-day, and I'm saying to everyone, hey, implants are cool, which I am. We should all get them. Maybe, like, how do I know what's on the firmware? Because most of the people doing this aren't hackers. There's heaps of just random people saying, oh, hey, I want an Opal card, or I want an NFC implant. If I had something in there which was like, you know, made you look like a criminal, or did all the things that traditional black hats do, there's a whole new wild frontier where there's no real black hat hackers looking at saying, oh, hey, we should do this, or maybe they are. So that's like an area that I'm sure in the next like 3 years we're going to see something like this come out. Malicious code for implants. So we're talking about Neuralink before. You know, everyone's like, oh, cool, we'll join with machines. And I'm like, well, what about if I'm actually evil and I put that in there to control you and make you just love working at Deloitte for the rest of your life? But it could be for personal gain. So maybe it just slightly influences you, just slightly put a few more tokens into something that you think you care a bit more about. And you shoot them all up and you don't end up voting for things you actually care about.
Works for normal democracy too.
That's it.
Rupert Murdoch.
So the other one, the guy that told me I should probably give this talk was, he said, what about typhoid Mary? What about if you're immune against something, so you can become a carrier? And then you just inject yourself with Ebola and walk around and just infect everyone you don't like. Like you just go to Canberra. In fact, I was going to say Parliament House, but it's like the whole of Canberra. And then something else, like an empathy virus. So I read a short story by David Brigg, and he was talking about this thing that makes you want to give more blood as a virus, and then no one ever looked for it because there's no reason for them to look for something that does good. But if you can make someone do more good just for you, or more empathetic, that's your boss or something, maybe you could actually subtly manipulate people towards your own will by being immunized against the thing that you're infecting them with. And this is a common theme. It's like kind of, I'm not infected, you are infected, through all the bio stuff. Okay, so Black Hat Nanotech, I'll just zip through it. Okay, so utility fog. Does everyone know what, can I have a show of hands what utility fog is? Smart dust. It's basically nanotech robots that can do anything. Like if they were in this room right now, I would just go to sit down in a chair with a form underneath me. There's... Yeah.
Quicker.
So there's... we might be able to encourage people to do this, but our end goal is to actually turn the whole world into nanobots. And maybe we're already on Mars. So this grey goo end of the world scenario is basically having self-replicating nanobots that don't have any stop mechanism on them, so they end up turning every single thing on the planet into themselves. But everyone's like, oh, you know, this would be a disaster situation that's caused by like a lack of responsibility or out of control replication. But I'm like, what about if it's actually deliberate malicious intent? So you have some vested interest in being off the planet and taking care of all the people we don't like. So implantable weapons is another one. So there's a blood-borne explosives, and this is where terrorists will probably get in, which is things that are basically undetectable. You can walk through metal detectors, they can't find anything. You know, our body's filled with iron, but we don't go off when we go through metal detectors. What about if that was actually, you know, some other type of metal or explosives that are in trace amounts that could still destroy an airport, but maybe pass through everything else? And the other big one is like nano surveillance and infiltration. And I reckon we can probably do this now. So we're looking at doing things like these tiny little nanosats that go to other solar systems. But there are hack labs we can get into to do nano surveillance and infiltration now in a very, not nano, but maybe micro.
Yeah, like, I always freak out about getting like cheap e-juice.
Yeah.
What the fuck's in that?
Well, you're already getting nanoparticles in your vape as well.
Yeah.
Sell the e-juice. That's the take-home message. Okay, so Black Hat AI, I'm not going to talk to you about this because I'm not an AI dude. Probably already happening. Basically, if you can just encourage people to make more money, that's pretty much Black Hat AI. There's some other ways you can do it. High levels of optimization, the paperclip problem, turn everything into a paperclip. Make the perfect AI to do something that is malicious. And then I heard about this interesting thing, which is like actually hacking the compilers and the services that people who use AI use. So when you compile their AI, it slips something in, and the thing is maybe just like make it more optimal, make it optimize better, so that no one notices until it's too late. That's another big thing for the bio stuff. So we'll go into that. So this is CRISPR. So CRISPR is this targeted genome editing. What I've got is this is a gene drive. Can I show a show of hands? Who's heard of a gene drive? Yeah, about 20%. Okay, so basically, this is a mutation that propagates through the gene pool. So males have XY chromosomes and females have XX. What it basically does is, if you have two copies of this gene, you die. If you're, I realize that not all males have XX and not all females have, not all females have XX and not all males have XY, but for the purpose of this talk, we're just going to go through that one. So, if you have two copies of this gene, you die. If you have one copy, you survive. So you put it on the X chromosome. So all the men will only have one copy, and it copies itself across to the other chromosome if it's the same. So all the females die. So you make only male babies, and then all of them reproduce, and then all the people they reproduce with only have male babies. So we use this as a weapon already in mosquitoes. So I love this because it's one of the few times in biology, the guy that invented it is just like, oh, look, here's this novel thing where it copies itself to another chromosome. How can I wipe out an entire species? Rock on, George Church. Yeah. So basically, this shows normal inheritance of a single gene. So it gets split 50-50 between the first generation, then 50-50 between that, and then you get this thing called drift, where maybe it's only, you know, this is actually a perfect model, but you get drift where it would actually get selected against in this kind of one if it was not advantageous. But with this, it gets passed on to every male. So eventually, you only get males come out. So you notice the babies of this one, both male. Babies of this one, both male. Babies of this one, both male. Within 16 generations and 10,000 individuals, you have 100% penetrance in the population. The only problem is, how do we get that into humans? IVF clinics. So if you were someone in Israel and you had a certain population that you wanted to wipe out and you control all the IVF clinics, with 10,000 modified people, you could reach 100% in 16 generations. So you could effectively wipe someone out. And if you could keep it secret for like 4 to 6 generations, it would be too long before you worked it out to stop it. Because anyone who tries to have a baby is going to carry this, and we all know, like, if everyone was like, had enough restraint, we would have 0 STIs in the world. That's not the case. So eventually they'll wipe out their own species because they're horny. It's slow, but basically, if you can keep it a secret for long enough, you can wipe out an entire race. And like, that's what, and this happens, we know this. I don't know if next slide, okay. Israel already like was forcibly giving Depo-Provera to Ethiopian refugees. So it's not like they wouldn't do this, like they want to maintain the purity of their race. It's just like my argument is they probably haven't thought about it yet, or they haven't got enough IVF clinics. It's something like that. If ethnic bioweapons existed, Israel would use it, guaranteed. So basically, think about all these things coming together. Just super quickly, the convergence of the AI, the genetics, and the nanotech. If you're a black hat, you're going to have a crazy amount of power, and the only thing you should be using that power for is survival. How do you survive this super intelligent AI? How do you convince it it's a good idea to take you with it? Because we're not worthy. So, early adoption of cybernetic upgrades. Who's got a microchip? 2? Okay, yeah, well, you're all. Maximum vaccinations. So, I highly encourage everyone to get vaccinations. I'm trying to order some smallpox vaccinations. American military is actually immunized against smallpox. I am not. If the boomers actually hated us enough, they could just unleash smallpox because they're all immunized. And it would just take us all out in one go. We need the reverse of that. Okay, so encouraging techno-capitalism. So anytime someone's like, oh, I've got this new idea, it's kind of a bit evil, but I'm going to do it anyway. So yeah, sweet, and invest, and then create a great market for an off-label use of that, particularly if it's malicious. So with the Neuralink, you would say, yes, sweet, I'll invest in your company, Elon Musk, and when he has it, you use it to control rather than to put it on yourself. I'm not going to go heaps into that. Escape Earth is really, really good. It's good for the human race and it's good for you, because if anything goes down, it's probably going to happen here. If we're on Mars, we're probably a lot safer. Only sitcoms go to Mars. Back up your brain. If you can, download everything so you have a spare copy, and then become a black hat. And I think that's it. Thank you very much. I'm just going to give a super big shout out to Rich Lee. Thank you very much. He inspired me and helped me consult to come up with some cool ideas about how we're going to kill everyone. I really appreciate it, man. Question?
I had a quick question. Just on your last slide there, you talked about being an early adopter of technologies and going forward with these.
Yeah.
But also there was a lot of things about, for example, exploiting things and like the Neuralink and not taking it on. Any ideas on how to make decisions around kind of risk management? Which things should you adopt early because they have a low risk profile versus other things that potentially have a risk that could be exploited either now or in the future?
Honestly, I'd become an expert in any technology you use. Speak to the people that build it. See how much you trust them.
And should you assume that you trust them?
Yeah, go to DEF CON, speak to everyone there, see what people are interested in exploiting now. Like when I got my Opal card, I immediately had 3 people contact me saying we already have flaws in the Opal network, but we had no reason to exploit them. So I would like speak to the people who are creating it, ask them where are the vulnerabilities. If you were going to hack this, where would you go? And they might lie to you, but if they're a mate, see how, like, hopefully you can trust them, because you definitely can't trust the government.
So I'll just finish off. The Opal card is a particularly interesting one where I know that they actually implemented a system that was about 2 or 3 generations old at the time, and they chose not to actually implement the newest generation of stuff.
It's still just in case you want to. It's still reasonably secure, like secure enough for what they're doing, but like it's not great.
Black Hat.
Yeah.
Black Hat really a lot of the time revolves around disclosing privacy or invading privacy or protecting, privacy protections. Is there any sort of discussion about all these genetic companies that do genetic testing within your field, right? And say taking someone's sample, hair sample, knowing that they're allergic to nuts and killing them with that, and
I'm like big on this, hey, like, if you just Google smallpox genome right now, #1 hit is the entire smallpox genome. Now, there's no, like, you have, in America, like, you can get guns pretty easily, but it's actually even easier to get the smallpox genome.
Well, what about the
So with this data, a lot of it's held by private companies, but there's no responsibility for that company not to give it away, not to sell it to the highest bidder, not to be the no-face man and kill whoever's wants someone taken out. And I think that's a serious risk as well.
Yeah, just to follow up, I work for a company like that. Be careful, just make sure you read the terms of service before you send them data.
No, but I'm not saying anyone's data, right? Not just my own.
No. So if you wanted any of our data, we actually have an in-house blockchain.
I think what Leo's saying is that he could take a saliva sample from one of his girlfriend,
Someone
for example,
that I want to get rid of.
send it, find out the genome, and then take them out.
Yeah.
I'm
This
going
is
to
why
say
we
no
don't
questions.
send you back that information. Like, and it's all handled by a genetic counselor, and if the phenotype doesn't match you as a person, we'll tear it apart.
That's actually quite interesting.
How do they know it's me or not?
Because your genetics tells us, oh, you're a male or a female or have these particular features. We map phenotype, everything that you are, to your genome, and if it doesn't match, we'll report you to the police. We already do this.
So it's about blockchain.
So this is the way we tell the difference to make sure we haven't screwed up samples. So we do this quality control to make sure that the sample we actually have, the data we've gotten from that sample matches the patient we have using other means.
But you're Garvin as well, you're not a private institution. There's nothing to stop a private institution from setting up and doing it maliciously.
True.
I was going to do the last question to Max, and then I'm going to piss off.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to talk about, there's an interesting argument that AI will almost certainly take us with us, with it in the beginning infinity, because basically an AI needs to, like, as in everything that can become a universal understander and a universal explainer ultimately should converge on the same sort of truth, especially because an artificial general intelligence, the first culture it has is going to be our culture. Like, there's nothing else to learn from.
Isn't that the problem?
Well, except that through its, like, say it thinks for a year, and that's equivalent to 20,000 person years, it still has to go through being a teenager and, reading Shakespeare and all that sort of stuff and coming to terms with the original stuff. And that if, like, that's probably going to teach it that humans do have some useful capacity, and through technology it can bring us with it as long as we augment ourselves in the right sort of way. And because that's mostly a digital and technological thing, then that means that essentially within a few years that AI could, instead of making more AIs that either take a long time to spin up or things like that, they could just literally convert every human on the planet. And the humans that don't convert, either die out or are exterminated or whatever else. I don't know what morality.
We're going to have to debate this over more.
I don't know what morality is going to be, but there's definitely a very productive way to take humans with it, because we've already done the first part essentially, and through just some pretty simple, comparatively speaking, brain augmentation, we could become just as capable as that AI.
I'm there.
That's like the original plot of The Matrix with one of the Wachowski brothers, right? Okay, round of applause now. Sorry, guys. I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to introduce you to Shanti, because we don't have time for the panel, and then we'll just get some quick takes on the basic income from Shane Greenup. So Shanti, yeah, take it away. Sorry, just do a quick intro, and if anyone has any questions,
Yeah, sure. So if anyone does have any questions, I'll be here afterwards, or at the pub, or whatever's happening, so that's cool. So my name's Shanti. I am an entrepreneur. I work very much in the business world, but I don't quite do hardcore stuff. I'm very much a, hey, businesses will pay for this. Yeah. So, but I love all of this. So I am a biohacker and I love all of that stuff. I'm chipped. I'm like the one other person in this room. Like, really? Like, it's 2017. I don't understand why you guys aren't watching it. But anyway, so aside from having like 14 companies, I think now, and no sleep, thank you, smart drugs. Really. So aside from all that, my main pet project at the moment is Superhumanology. Superhumanology is a company I started with my hubby to basically vent my passion projects, which is all this biohacking stuff. So it's all around all the tech and all the fun stuff you can do with your body physically to create superhumans. So technology plus the physical stuff that you do, not necessarily fitness per se, but like anything physical or anything that you do on a regular basis, learning, all of that thing, and make it better. So in any venture that you want to do to become a better, faster, stronger human, more intelligent, all that sort of stuff, how tech incorporates that and incorporates into that and then moves forward. So that's what I do on a very practical level every day for myself and for quite a few other people, businesses and all that sort of stuff, whether it be virtual reality, random weird headsets that zap your brain, as I said, smart drugs, lots of things really, and how that all works together.
Put your hands up if you feel like interested in chipping yourself, say what Meow has done, using an Opal card or Shanti runs a Chip My Life business, and they've got a sort of innovation lab in the city.
Yeah.
So yeah, feel free to reach out to her if you'd like to chip yourself.
I'm all about playing.
That's right. Okay, now thanks for that. Is there any questions? Sorry, yeah, is there any questions before we move on to Shane? No, thanks, Shanti.
Hi everyone. Okay, I'll try and get it super quick. Luckily, some stuff has been covered in Nathan's talk with AI and stuff. First of all, who here has heard of basic income? Because it's got a lot of attention lately, so yeah, everyone's heard of it. But who thinks they know quite a lot about it? Okay, cool. So there is something for me to cover. I'm just making sure first. So, quick definition: basic income is a periodic cash payment, unconditionally delivered to all on an individual basis without means test or work requirement. Okay, so the key to this is the unconditionality and the periodicity. So it's not just like, here, have $1 million, good luck for the rest of your life. It's just like, it's a living wage. The whole point of a basic income is to cover your basic expenses. That's the idea. A little intro that I skipped over very quickly was that I wasn't able to make it tonight until an event got cancelled, so I prepared this in an hour this afternoon. So to make it easier on myself, I put the notes after each slide. Many ways to learn it. So that's what it is. I was hoping I'd have that presented to you, where you sort of like get the second slide, but Google doesn't do that. So yeah, so that's what it is, but that's a broad concept, so there's many different ways to implement it. And while the pure idea is to cover all your basic needs, you can have a partial basic income. So an example of that is in Alaska, they tax all the oil money that they make, and they put it into a big savings account, and at the end of every year they take the dividends from that savings and they pay it out to all Alaskans. And they get like $1,000 a year per person. It's not enough to live off, but it's kind of nice getting $1,000 every year, right? So that's like a partial basic income. But there's other things like, do you give it to children? Do you give it to only citizens or to everyone in the country? Do you give lots of money? Does it replace? So one of the divisions, and Nathan mentioned this as well, is a sort of the left-wing, right-wing division, where it's like the libertarians wanted to replace all welfare. They just want to like minimize government to nothing and everyone gets a payment and it's done. Whereas other people, and I'm on this side, argue that people with disabilities have different needs to people that don't have disabilities. So welfare system still has a role in my take of a basic income. But the point is, there's lots of different ways to implement it, and they will be sorted out and tested with time. Now, I've had lots of people say, oh, we've got a basic income in Australia, because if you lose your job, then you get welfare. If you're disabled, we take care of the sick and the poor. To which I say, that is not a basic income. This system that we have is very, very conditional, and that conditionality makes all the difference. If you lose your job, You start getting payments, and you are disincentivized to get another job unless you're like able to get a high-paying job. The ability to step into a part-time job, it's there, but you may get like $50 more a week and lose half of your time. The incentives do not align. So the problems with the current welfare system, of which I could go into many, you've got the welfare trap, what I just described. Social stigma is another problem with it. So people that are on the dole bludgers, single parents, just popping out babies, you hear it all the time. Basic income, everyone gets it. You can't stigmatize anyone with it because everyone's got it. The waste of time and resources of validating and verifying who deserves it and who doesn't. Both in terms of Centrelink's resources, paying people, and the people that have to stand in line and prove that they aren't rich. And at that point, the waste of time of trying to prove that I'm not wealthy or whatever, the people that are like, have social anxiety issues or mental health issues that most need the help, they've got to go into Centrelink all the bloody time and argue with people that, no, I really need this. That is not a good system for helping people that need it. Whereas a basic income is just like, boom, if you're a person, you get it. Simple. Now, this is a breakdown of time of basically the shrinking middle class, okay? A basic income will save the middle class. This is something I don't hear many other people talking about on a basic income. This is so important. When people get introduced to basic income for the first time, they go, wait, so rich people will get money? Yes. Bill Gates will get given a basic income. But the amount of tax you probably have to pay in pay an increase is far greater than the income you receive, so it's irrelevant. Forget about rich people. The other thing that everyone then focuses on is the poor people, because a basic income will disproportionately benefit people in poverty more than anyone. If you've got nothing and you get $100 a week, that is incredible. If you earn $1,000 a week, you get $100 a week, it's not a lot, it's good, but it's not like a huge amount of money because someone's got nothing. So people in poverty are the ones that really, really, really benefit from it, and that's so important in society. But the vast majority of people are in the middle still, even with a shrinking middle class, but still most people earn enough to get by. Most people earn enough money to pay rent and to get food, and they live paycheck to paycheck. They can't save, they can't go on vacation, they can't go to the movies, unless you're in that really nice upper middle class area. Most people struggle to get by. Now you give everyone a basic income, you help people in poverty, and you create a burgeoning, I don't know if that's the right word, a blossoming, a booming middle class that have disposable income. They can go on vacations, they can go to the movies, they can go to dinner. The economy will boom on the back of basic income. And, like, what would you do if you had, how many people here, like, I don't want to make you, like, say who live paycheck to paycheck, but I presume most of you probably have to pay rent, buy food, and you have an income that covers it. It probably doesn't leave a lot of money left over every week. And what would you do if you had $200 left over at the end of every week? You would increase your savings. You may put it into your retirement fund and you retire sooner. Maybe you go to 3 days work a week or 4 days work. Maybe you give to charity. Maybe you have a family member who's come down with a chronic illness who can't work and their basic income isn't enough, because the whole point is just enough to survive. And maybe you want to just give $100 a week to someone you care about, your wife, your mother. Most people do not have that capacity right now to bring in someone, a dependent, and care for them. But a basic income gives everyone that sort of freedom to partake in society, whether it be economically or public people. You got it all? Just going to go, poverty, cool, that'll do. Now, this is where we hit link into transhumanism. The big argument. Yeah, this video. Has anyone not seen this video?
Best video.
The link's there, just copy paste it. Just remember CGP Grey. When Max was talking earlier, he was talking about the rules for rulers. That's one of CGP's videos called The Rules for Rulers. It's actually based on a book, and I imagine Max has read the real book. But this guy is just a god of YouTube. Anyway, the connection to transhumanism. We need a basic income because automation is coming. We like it. Now Nathan's covered this, so jobs, self-driving cars are going to do things. Lots of people say that, the Luddite movement has happened before. We thought we were going to lose all our jobs, and they smashed the weaves. And I'm assuming everyone knows that story. Industrial revolution, weaving looms got invented, and so all the weavers are like, no, we need our jobs, and they smashed it. That was not against progress. That was a group of people going, we need our jobs. This is the only skill I never had, and you're taking that job away from me. Now I am in poverty, and I have no other skills. It's not against progress, and this is what's going to happen right now. We don't need to replace all jobs. I don't care that you say, oh, we'll take half, get rid of jobs and we'll invent new jobs. The people that lose that job, those truck drivers that have only done truck driving their whole life are going to be replaced by self-driving trucks. Go retrain. You've got no income, by the way, you've lost your job because there's no job there anymore. Go back to university and get a degree and learn to become an architect. Good on you. And do it with no income, well, maybe you get welfare if you're lucky. And the whole system is just...
Can I jump in here for a second? I've had this same discussion. Quite an interesting question. Do you not think that more people will be, less and less people become truck drivers, and over time, that, let's say something like truck driving, less and less people will become truck drivers, in 20 years it won't be a viable career option for people to do, and that we're not actually going to hit all truck driver automation before the time that those people that are currently doing it are no longer doing it, they're retired?
I think, yeah, the amount of time it's going to take to replace truck drivers is much quicker than 20 years.
Well, I think technology gets implemented quite slow. That's the only point.
Yeah. So actually, this is one of the things that it's not a matter of if it will happen; it's a matter of when, right? So how long this automation takes. Dock workers.
Absolutely obliterated.
So yeah, whether truck drivers get replaced within the course of 5 years or 20 years is almost immaterial to this process. There will be truck drivers losing jobs at the same time that there are checkout chicks losing jobs at the same time that there are what are the other ones like doctors. Yeah, but so the point is you've got a constant group of people of employees losing jobs, going unemployed, and so you've got a growing group of people that need to be re-educated into a presumably shrinking group of jobs. Is my presumption, because this is going back to the Luddite movement, we thought we were going to have no jobs left, but we get new jobs. The replacing of mechanical labour of the 1900s is very different to the AI, fine motor control robotics that we've got now. So as you replace, we've replaced our strength, we're replacing our fine motor control, we're replacing our intelligence and creativity. What's left of humans? Okay? So over time, it's inevitable that we'll wipe out all jobs. So there needs to be something in place to catch those that can't retrain or those that can't get jobs, which is inevitable, right? So we have to change the way we relate to work, because at the moment, if you don't have a job, you're a loser. And I don't mean society tells us this and judges us this way, but we judge ourselves this way because we've been raised in it. We define ourselves by the jobs that we have that earn us an income. And as an entrepreneur who hasn't made $1 million yet, I struggle with this because I live out in suburbia and I'm trying to change the world in 3 or 4 different projects at any given time. But you talk to my neighbours and I'm just an unemployed bum that lives with my parents. Because I don't have a job that makes me enough money to afford rent in Sydney. And then this is a common thing these days. It's happening more and more because rent's going up and jobs are decreasing. So the way society judges us for not having a job that makes money has to change because it's no longer relevant. We have to be able to allow people to embrace this idea of, you know what, I'm going to work on this because it matters to me and because it makes a difference. And it's not going to make me money, but that doesn't matter. So, okay, for the long classes, have pleasure too. Because at the moment in society, we have a split system where some people have to work to survive, and other people get to choose if they want to work. And the basis of that division is a historical accident. Because back when we evolved, if you needed food, you go hunting, if you needed water, you drink from the river. And over time, where are we now?
Hands up. Hands up. Closing arguments.
So, yeah, okay, I can't really sure. Wealthy people don't have to work for money. They can choose if they want to work or not. Poor people have to work. Now, if you think about how society is set up now, if you're poor and you don't choose to work, or you can't find a job, society basically says, well, you're not getting money. If you don't have money, you can't afford rent, you can't afford food. You become homeless, and you're begging on the street. That's your lot. Now think about that person that's begging on the street who can't get a job, or God forbid, chooses not to work, the ultimate sin of our society. We treat them with disdain. Now, if that same person goes into a house to steal everything that someone owns, and then the family comes in, they murder that family, probably rape them first. We then take that person, we put them on trial, and we put them in prison for the rest of their life, where they'll get food and accommodation. At no point do we go, you know what we should do? We should starve them to death. At no point do we say, we should expose them to the elements. We save those punishments for those that choose not to work, or just those that can't get a job. And so this is why a basic income is an absolute necessity, because as more and more people can't get jobs, as a society it is intolerable that our punishment for those people who can't get jobs is to starve and expose them to the elements as par for the course. And that's all. Thank you.
So yeah, I've got a question. So you mentioned, you sort of made the case that the middle class is the most benefited by, well, the sort of, I guess, people in poverty are most benefited.
Yeah, as a population.
In terms of population, yeah. So I mean, how do you account for sort of just the normal market mechanics of the job market? I mean, you know, if you're an employer and you now know that everyone's getting $200 a week, and all of a sudden you've got workers who go, oh, well, look, I'm getting extra $200 a week, so I'm prepared to work for $200 less because I now have $200 for free. Yep. So all of a sudden then you'll have employers, and this is just my thinking, you'll have employers who are hiring those people who are prepared to work for $200 less, and all the people who aren't don't get jobs because they can't compete with those people who are prepared to work for $200 less, and so you just have a correction really in the jobs market.
To some extent that will happen. And this is probably a big caveat with all basic income is we do need to do the experimenting. There is a lot of uncertainty and unknowns about how it will affect a lot of things. On this particular issue, I think what will happen is that will happen in both directions depending on the job. So you may decide that, you know what, it's not worth the $7 an hour I get paid to work at McDonald's, I quit. And so that actually pushes the cost of hiring, you know, a cleaner may go up because no one wants to do that. And so they want to get paid enough to justify that, you know, lack of desire to do that job. Whereas if your job is to be a marine biologist swimming with dolphins, maybe you want to do that for free because screw it, that's something you've always wanted to do. So what's amazing about a basic income is that it puts the power of decision in the hands of the employee. So at the moment, the employer has all the power because I need a job. I have to have a job, otherwise I will lose my home and starve. So you have no bargaining power unless you have the education and you're a high, you know, such a small percentage of the population have that luxury of education and capability and knowledge to like pick their job. Most people are dependent on it, so they don't have that luxury.
I mean, I guess it's that sort of ties into a bigger question, which is, I mean, if you know, how much money are you giving people? Because, you know, in your example just there, you're talking about people not having to work if they don't want to. Now, I mean, because if that's where you're going, I mean, depending on people's standards of living, I mean, $200 obviously isn't enough to live on in this city. It's definitely not enough to live on if you have a dependent, like a child, so. Is that sort of where you see it going? I mean, should people be given enough money to raise their entire family?
That goes back to the first slide where there's so many different ways of implementing it, and I have not seen any consensus at all on how it should be done. But the fundamental premise of a basic income is that it covers your basic cost of living. So it would need to be like $400 a week, maybe. You still wouldn't be able to live in Sydney, but you don't have to live in Sydney anymore because you get it no matter where you live, right? So that would be a full basic income. But whether we implement a full basic income up front or we do a partial one first, you know, how this plays out, who knows, and what happens exactly is to be determined. But, yeah. In each different case, you get different consequences, right?
Sure.
Just on your point, I think what you're actually describing is just nominating an inflection point of when automation or other forms of technology become more advantageous to implement rather than implementing human. The question I have for you is actually more the counter-argument to this, which is, you know, you started with the very first part of your presentation being that there are important things that are not profitable, which I can take on some basis, but the idea that things of value don't have a monetary value to them, I think kind of is a misleading premise. And to me, if you're actually doing something of value and quantifying that, money isn't anything special than just a form of actually quantifying and storing that value and exchanging that. So I guess to kind of counter that, how does that play into this? With if you're not doing anything of value arbitrarily, how do you actually incentivize people to continue to do those things that we as a collective thing decide is valuable rather than just...
Well, at the moment, like, the system we're in is terrible at valuing things that are valuable. That's why the photo that's up there is like, I take it to be like an elderly couple or something, so aged care is terribly undervalued, but incredibly necessary and important to people being cared for. Feeding the homeless is something that people do voluntarily all the time, but there's no money in it because homeless people have no money. So taking care
Somebody values it. Somebody's paying for the charity work to actually do that. Somebody's paying for that. Somebody values it. Somebody actually puts in that effort. And
but that's
I understand the moral argument.
But there's no economic basis there, is there? Someone values it, so someone's choosing it. But there's no money there.
There is, because if somebody actually isn't out there campaigning for it, actually raising sponsorship or donations for it,
I'm going to jump in. So I run a biohack facility, which is the first open access molecular biology lab. We receive no funding.
Okay.
But there's people that access our lab that do have value for it, but most of them have no money. Even though in the future they may have a startup that's incredibly valuable.
Sure.
And they need access to this to be able to even do it, because they can't get a prototype together without a lab, right? Chief Scientist Office tells me, fuck you. Government gives me no money whatsoever. We're lucky enough to, after 3 years, eventually find Cicada Innovations that hosts us. But before that, the founders are putting their own money in because they see value in it. But I'm volunteering full time, and maybe this year finally I'll get a wage, right? The thing is, there's that huge period of time where I see value in it and no one else does, but it doesn't mean that what I'm doing isn't valuable. People around the world.
I agree, but that's also kind of the fundamental piece of being an entrepreneur, is recognizing that you need to actually develop something and build something of value that you will then get.
So you basically give everyone the option to become an entrepreneur, not just rich white men.
I was going to say, that is the answer to your original question. That's what a basic income allows you to do. It allows everyone to choose to do
without that natural selective process of like, if I invest my time with this expectation of return that the rest of society doesn't actually value, then there is no actual incentive for me to chase something that is of collective value and just go off and there's not.
Reputation?
There's no
financial reward at the end.
There's no failure mechanism.
But that may be good.
The failure is different. It's not that you're dead or homeless. The failure mechanism is you have to start from scratch again.
Yeah.
And I think that's...
But that's not a failure in the case of...
So basically what you're describing is, I decide I'm going to start a new enterprise. Like, I love Flux, so this is not against Flux. I love Max talk. Let's say Flux is a complete dead in the water. It's not going anywhere. And he decides to invest 10 or 20 years of his life to push crap uphill and it's not going anywhere. The failure point of that is he's just wasted 10 or 20 years of his life. And then he's got to start from scratch, right? So the difference is in the current system, you do it for 2 or 3 years if you're lucky rich white guy with parents that take care of you, and then you go, well, this isn't going anywhere, my life's grinding on, I'm not getting a job, and you give up in 2 or 3 years. Maybe in 5 or 6 years, it was going to be successful. Like every entrepreneurial story is a story of Walt Disney, 99 rejections and the 100th gets it, so just determination to keep going. Maybe 10 years of grind is what the world-changing idea takes. But in a system where you are punished for not having a job, in a system where you are punished for not being born into the right class or race, a system where everyone is guaranteed the basic necessity of survival gives everyone that platform to try.
Yeah. Like that.
Yeah, thanks for coming everyone, and thanks again to our sponsors, General Assembly. Any last words around cleaning up the space?
No, not really, just thanks for coming guys, and if you could clear out rather quickly that would be nice, so lovely Georgia also didn't get to go home tonight.
Thanks Georgia.
I hope you guys have a good morning.
That's the smiles of the meetup, if you guys want to check that out. Well, everyone except me, sorry.